This is Cosmo. He's my male crown-tail betta fish, and he's new. Yesterday, Cosmo moved into his new home, this 18-litre tank. I wanted Cosmo to have chance to settle into his new home before I tried giving him any food, so that night I didn't offer him anything. But this morning, it's time for breakfast. The first thing I'm going to try him with is this tropical fish flake food. I asked at the aquatics where I bought him from what they'd been feeding him, and they said this, so I thought I was onto a surefire win. Now overnight, Cosmo has been a busy little fish and has filled his feeding and breathing window with a bubble nest. This makes feeding time a little bit harder, and sorry Cosmo, but I'm going to have to move some of your bubbles out of the way before I can give you any food. I added a small pinch of the flakes, which he completely ignored. To try to attract his attention, I added a second pinch, and he wasn't much keener about that either. He really wasn't that interested in the flakes. I left them for about 10 minutes, but he just wasn't that bothered, so I ended up taking them out. When I bought the flaked food, I also picked up this little pot of freeze-dried bloodworms. I thought they'd do as an occasional treat. They're too fatty to feed as an everyday food, but as he hadn't touched the flakes, I thought I'd try to tempt his appetite with a lovely tasty worm. Here comes Cosmo, probably hoping that I've got something tastier for him this time. To try to win Cosmo round to the worms, I thought my best bet would probably be to waggle it about in the water in a worm-like fashion to try to get his attention. It took a couple of minutes, but eventually Cosmo decided that he was hungry after all, and he came over and took a worm. He couldn't be tempted into taking another one from the tweezers, so in the end I left it on the surface of the water, left him to it, and eventually he did come up and take it. So now he has eaten something, but it wasn't exactly a runaway success, and he can't have bloodworms every day. So I went back out to the aquatics and bought this little tub of pellets. There's a picture of a betta fish on the box, so how could he resist? I dropped one in, accidentally on top of the plant, moved it to where he could see it, and he was interested in it almost immediately. He was interested enough in the pellet to spend the next quarter of an hour guarding it. He inspected it from all angles, flared his fins at it, and didn't leave it alone. He had the occasional peck at it, but he definitely wasn't eating it. Eventually the pellet sat there for so long that it took on water and sank, and that's when Cosmo sprang to life. It dropped down on top of his log, and he was really interested in it. Although the pellet had softened up enough to sink, it wasn't yet soft enough for Cosmo to be able to get an easy bite from it, so now he spent a happy quarter of an hour playing with it. This seemed to be great enrichment for the fish. He really seems to be enjoying himself. Bettas are intelligent fish, and they need something to do so they don't get bored. This seems to be perfect. However, just as the pellet had started to soften up enough for Cosmo to be able to actually eat it, he managed to accidentally knock it down behind his log. He tried his best for several minutes, but he just couldn't reach the pellet, and he was clearly starting to get quite frustrated. I felt sorry for him and decided to try to retrieve the pellet myself with the tweezers. I also didn't want the food to degrade and pollute the tank. Turns out reaching the pellet was really quite difficult, so enjoy this sped up, believe it or not, clumsy footage of me spending 10 minutes trying to get a fish pellet out from underneath a piece of wood. At least it gave Cosmo something else fun to watch. Success! I finally managed to get the pellet and I put it back on the piece of log where he'd be able to see it. I cannot believe he just did that, and I think he did that on purpose. Of course, I couldn't be beaten by a fish, so I had to spend another 5 minutes scrabbling around under the log to get the pellet back again. Like I haven't got anything else to do today, Cosmo. I've learned my lesson this time. I'm standing guard with the tweezers, trying to stop Cosmo knocking the food straight back underneath the log. And this was how we managed to discover our new favourite game. It turns out Cosmo really enjoys being fed straight from the tweezers. I can move the food around in front of him and he gets to chase it. Again, it's really good enrichment for the fish, and it's quite good fun for me too. Later in the day, and it's time for Cosmo's second feed. This time I went straight for pellets. I let one soften up on the surface of the tank for 10 minutes, and then I went in with the tweezers and held it in front of him. This time Cosmo wanted the food straight away. He knew what was happening. I've worked out that if I show him the food and drop it, he loves to chase it. He often refuses to pick it back up from the floor himself, which means I have to do it. He really does watch and wait for me to drop the food. I suppose it brings out his natural hunting instinct. Once the majority of the pellet has been eaten, Cosmo's really good and goes round clearing up all of the little bits from the bottom of the tank. I'm not going to give up offering him the flake food. I think he might take it eventually, and it'd be good for him to have a varied diet. I definitely want to try him with some live foods at some point, as he really seems to enjoy chasing things. So Cosmo got his breakfast and his lunch in the end. If you'd like to carry on watching Cosmo's day-to-day life, then do hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss a thing. The Daily Tank, the home of the Daily Tank video.